Hello, ladies. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for jumping on here with me. I am so excited. I know we have been talking this week, kind of focused on the differentials. So I am excited. Today is going to be continuing with the build part of our training. So I am so excited that you're here with me, that you're joining me. So we're going to do a couple different things for tonight's training class. So I want to go ahead and jump in and get started. And again, thank you so much for jumping on here, being with us live for this kind of differential tour work through with us at ladyjeepers.com. So thank you, ladies. Hello. Oh, thank you for jumping on with me. You ladies are so sweet. We're going to go ahead and jump in, get started, because there are a lot of things that I do want to be sharing with you tonight. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. So this week has been focused on differentials, and it is going to be tonight is continuing with the build training and adding in some of the mechanical and tech with it. So tonight, I want to do a quick look inside the rear differential of a 14-bolt rear end that is locked all the time. So I know through this build training we've talked about different kinds of axles, different kinds of differentials, all these different pieces that kind of go together as we are talking about putting together, designing our Jeep build. So tonight, I want to kind of take you for an inside look. This is my YJ. So this is the rear end, the rear differential in my YJ. So this is an upgraded 14-bolt rear end, because like we talked about in one of our previous classes when we were talking about axles and talking about like gears and axles, we talked about going to 1 ton. So what I have on my YJ is, so it is, tonned out, or it has 1 ton upgrades made. So I have 1 ton axles underneath my YJ. So in the rear end, I have a 14-bolt rear end, which is what is creating the 1 ton axle, the 1 ton in the back. So what we're going to do is jump in. Chad's going to give us a quick tour so that you can actually see this is my rear differential. This is with the differential cover already taken off, but so you can actually see inside. So now, as we're talking about inside our differentials, there are different kinds of setups. So this is why I wanted to show you. This is not going to be your norm. What you're going to see under, your JK, JKU, your unmodified YJ or CJ or any TJ, LJ, anything like that. This is a modified rear end, so it's a 14-bolt. But I wanted you to be able to see what the differences are and what different differentials and different axles and different setups look like as you're learning, even if you will never go to a 1 ton. I will never go 1 ton on my JKU. It's my daily driver. It's going to be set up to be 100% my daily driver, and it's going to have some modifications made for its off-road capability and longevity, but it will not be 1 ton. But as you're learning, it's kind of neat to get to see different setups, different things that maybe you would not typically see. So then you can see what the difference is and kind of understand that as we're working forward. So I'm going to go ahead and play Chad's little video for us for a look inside the differential of a 14-bolt rear end.
So these are your carrier bearings.
What do those do?
This is a cap, and these 2 bolts on each side hold your bearing, which is what your spool or your carrier rides on. And then your axle shafts insert into your spool or your carrier or your locker. So in this rear end, you have 2 gears. You have a ring gear, and then coming in from the front that spins this, that attaches to your driveway, is your pinion gear. Your spool bolts directly to your ring gear, and if you'll zoom in, you'll see it's just a big piece of steel that bolts to this gear and has two tubes on it that the axle shafts slide into. There's no spider gears, there's no locker, no nothing. So this is a spooled rear end. It's a GM 14 bolt and it's locked all the time.
So I wanted to share that with you ladies, just to kind of see the inside, because we are going to go ahead and jump into our next part tonight, which is going to be going over different setups. So, you know, lockers versus limited slip. And we're going to start talking about like this inside your differential, because there are different kinds of gears and different kinds of setups based on what you have. So this, I wanted you guys to get to see. I thought it was really neat, you know, when you can actually start to see inside some of these different pieces, and kind of get the look to the inside of what it looks like, how it works. So like Chad was explaining, so for this YJ, it is locked all the time. So like you'll hear some people like weld the rear end, so it's locked all the time. But so this means that anytime I put this Jeep down in four-wheel drive, it is locked. So there is no selectable locker. I have to actually, you know, take it out of four-wheel drive or put it in four-wheel drive. And that means it is locked as soon as it's in four-wheel drive. So this is a little different than what you would find like in your JK or your JKU, or I mean, even some of your other builds as well. But this is what we have for the setup in my YJ. Again, this is 1 ton. It is locked so all the time. So it is set up a little bit different. So now what I want to do is I want to jump in and talk about some of the different options that you can have. So with a limited slip differential in your axle, so if you have a limited slip differential in your axle, we're going to talk about 3 different types of axles tonight, not just the locker and the locking axle, because there are multiple different types of axles. So just because you own a four-wheel drive vehicle does not mean that you have a locking axle or that you have lockers. So it means you're either going to be an open differential, a limited slip differential, or a locker locked differential. So we're going to start with the limited slip differential in your axle. So if you have 1 tire with traction and 1 tire without traction, so basically if you have 1 tire that's spinning and you have 1 tire that's not, so it actually is trying to grab and it's trying to move, the limited slip differential is going to take the power away from the tire that's spinning, so that instead of that tire spinning really fast and then the tire that has traction spinning slower, what it's going to do is the limited slip differential is going to take the power away from the tire that's spinning, and it's going to give more power to the tire that is not spinning, that has traction. And this is once you're in four-wheel drive. So again, that example, if you were to pull up and you had your front tires up against the rock and you were to hit the gas, say it was undercut. So let's say 1 tire is down a little bit, 1 tire is up a little bit. So you have better traction with the tire that's down a little bit. The tire that's kind of up doesn't have as good a traction. So when you go to hit the gas, all 4 tires are going to start to move. Well, what's going to happen is, let's say the front right tire is up and it starts to spin. It can't get traction. The limited slip differential is now going to take that power. So instead of that 1 tire spinning really fast and the tire that has the traction going slow, it's going to take the power from the one that's spinning really fast, and it's going to transfer more power to the tire that's on the ground that has the most traction. So that then that tire can start to grab and to pull and to work to get you up out of or over that obstacle. So with the limited slip differential in your axle, what I want you to think about is, so this, I don't know if you can see my little pointer moving, but this picture on the right, I mean, it's a pencil drawing, but it is a drawing of the inside of your differential. So there are lots of different pieces and components inside your differential. This is going to be inside where your gears are. So these are your different gears. So I don't know if you can kind of see the teeth in them. So this is inside your actual differential, inside where your gears are. So for a limited slip differential in your axle, this piece right here is a preloaded spring pack. So it's going to be right in the center of your differential. So it's in between where your teeth are, so that they're not going to meet from left to right. You in between them, you're going to have this preloaded spring pack right in the center. So what that does is that is what's going to allow one side to get or lose traction, and it's based on the force that's applied. So when one side of the spring is going to get pushed into the teeth, then that's going to go ahead and it's going to transfer the power, so that it's going to go from the tire that's spinning, and it's going to transfer, because of the pressure in this spring, the power to the tire that's going to need it. So that is what the actual inside case of your differential, inside your differential with your gears, this is what this looks like in a limited slip differential in your axle. So now we're going to jump over and talk about our axle lock, or our lockers for short. You're going to hear most people are going to call them lockers. I mean, the technical term is axle lock. This is a lunchbox locker. So next week's class, we're going to go all in depth about lockers, because that is an entire class. But this is our lead up to it, because I want you to understand the difference between the different kind of axles and differentials before we go straight to lockers. So essentially, a locker is going to lock both tires in unison to turn together. So that's regardless of traction. So it doesn't matter if one tire has traction or if it doesn't. Both front tires, if you think about the locker, is the gears are actually going to come together and lock together, and it's going to turn that axle as if it was one long shaft. So it's now locking it together so that the power is evenly being distributed to both front tires, so or back tires, depending on if you have lockers front and rear. But if you think about it, both tires now are going to get the same power, they're going to spin the same, and they're going to move the same, and they're going to always move together. So it doesn't matter if they have power or not. Now, for an open differential, and depending on what era Jeep you have, what make Jeep you have, what model, if you have a Jeep or not, depending on what four-wheel drive vehicle you have, a lot of the four-wheel drives come with the open differential. And what that means is that the power is going to go to the tire with the least resistance. So essentially, the tire that doesn't have traction, or like let's say it's the tire that's off the ground a little bit when you're up against the rock. So it's the tire that's spinning. With an open differential, that means that the power is going to go to the tire that has the least amount of resistance. So it's going to be the one that doesn't have as much traction, which means the tire that's spinning is going to get more power. So that tire is going to spin faster. Less power is going to be going to the tire that has more resistance. And so therefore the tire that's spinning is going to go faster. The one that has traction isn't going to get as much power. So that's the difference between the open differential and your limited slip and your locker. So if you think about a little bit of a difference between your limited slip differential and your locker. So if you were to pull up to that same rock with your limited slip, like we talked about, if one tire starts spinning, it's going to put more power to the one that's not spinning, so it can grip to help to dig, to help walk you up that rock. If you have a locker, what that means is both tires are going to work together exactly the same. So the same amount of pressure, they're rotating the same. But what that also means is if you're in a spot where, say, your front right tire is up off the ground, both tires have power. So as the vehicle starts to move forward, and as, let's say, the front right tire now starts to hit the rock, it's going to have the same pull and the same force within it as the front left tire. There's no change in power that has to then have a slight delay to go back to, putting power to both tires. So that's a little bit of the difference when we start talking about lockers versus limited slip versus our open differential. Now, something I do want to talk about as we're talking about the different differentials is for ease of turning, as well as the stress that's put on your steering parts. So I kind of went in order. So the easiest vehicle, the easiest, vehicle to turn with a differential is going to be an open differential. So if you have an open differential, it means there's nothing in between your gears. So when you go to turn, that means that it's going to be easy for you to turn. There's not going to be resistance from one tire to another. It's going to be smooth, and it's going to put less stress on your steering parts when you're in four-wheel drive, because there isn't any kind of bite to it. There's not going to be any kind of stickiness or grab to it. It's going to be a much smoother turn. It's going to be easier for you to turn, and it's going to put less stress on your steering parts. Now, in your limited slip differential, it is designed so that when you go to make your turn, it's going to help to change which tire is going to get power so that you can easily make your turn. So for a limited slip differential, it's going to feel like it's pretty easy to turn when you have it in four-wheel drive. And so it's going to put a little bit of stress on your steering parts, more so than an open differential, but it's not going to put an extreme amount of stress on your steering. The locker. So selectable lockers are going to change this just a little bit. We're going to go really in depth in that in the next class as we're talking about the type of lockers. But when you have your differential locked, so again, it is now the gears are locked together and both front tires are turning the same with the same amount of power all the time. So what that means is when you go to turn, there is not going to be power taken from one tire and applied to another to be able to make the turn. Because when you make a turn, one tire is coming out and around and one tire is dropping back to be able to make a turn. So what's going to happen when you're locked and both tires are getting the same power and are moving together is it's going to feel much harder to actually turn your Jeep or your vehicle. Because what's happening is you are now fighting your steering a little bit, because both tires are moving together. So it's going to be harder to get the vehicle to actually be able to turn, because it is not going to allow one tire to get more power than the other to be able to smoothly make that turn. So the locker is also going to put the most amount of stress on your steering parts. So if you have completely stock steering, you can use a locker. You just don't want to have your locker on all the time. And especially if you're on a ride or on an obstacle, we're going to have to be doing a lot of turning. That is going to put an extreme amount of stress on all of your steering components and parts. So when we're talking about ease of steering, ease of stress put on all your different parts, your open differential is going to be the easiest for you to turn and steer, and it's going to put the least amount of pressure on any of your steering components and parts. The limited slip differential is going to be a little bit harder to turn, but it still is going to go ahead and it's going to change which tire is going to get more power than the other, so you're still going to be able to make a pretty smooth turn. The locker, you're going to fight the locker to make the turn because you're fighting the tires, just mechanically getting all of the same power and not allowing one tire to kind of be able to push around forward while the other tire drops back. So just think about that as we start talking about next week. We're going to go right into lockers, all types of different lockers, but we are going to talk about what are the best choices if you do decide that you want to move up from an open differential or a limited slip differential to a locker. What is going to be your best choice for you based on the vehicle that you have and the build that you're going to want to do. And of course, based on if it's your daily driver, if you're going to go straight for a trail rig that doesn't daily drive. So there's a big difference between what types of lockers and what use you're going to use them for, as well as then what kind of steering component parts are you going to have to upgrade based on that and based All right. So I hope that was helpful this evening, ladies. I know that was a lot of information all at once. We are going to be going more in depth into the locker and the different types of lockers that there are, because there's selectable locker, you have air lockers, you have mechanical lockers, you have the electric lockers. There's so many different options. So that is going to be the next thing that we're moving into, going a little more in depth into the actual lockers as well. But then we are also continuing with more differential training with our Friday training class. So this week I tried to kind of do like a double duty, add more training, get more in, because I was so excited about the differential and some new things that we're bringing forward to you ladies. And then we are going to continue with the differential training as well. So for tomorrow, for our Friday training class, we are going to go in depth as to why you're doing an upgraded differential cover, what that means. So we're going into the why and the what. So what you want to upgrade to and why you want to upgrade to it. And then don't worry, the how is coming up. We have lots of new training because we're jumping into our mechanical and tech. So along with following with our more differential training with our Friday training class, we also are going to be doing part 1 in draining and flushing your differential. So tomorrow we're going to continue with some of the build by talking about upgrading your differential cover, what you want to upgrade to and why you want to upgrade to it. And then we're going to jump in for our mechanical and tech, and we are doing part 1 of flushing and draining your differential. So I am excited. And then we're going to continue with the how you are going to do the modification for your differential cover upgrade, as well as then continue with the mechanical and tech with our part 2 of draining and flushing your differential as well. So I hope to see you ladies tomorrow, Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here again for our live training class. And thank you for jumping on tonight for kind of our bonus added training for this week. And I'm so excited to share all of this with you ladies. Have a wonderful Thursday. Thank you for jumping on. We'll be jumping in to the chat. So if you have questions, go ahead and continue to put your questions in the chat. And Chad and I will jump in there to answer questions for you ladies as well. And then don't forget, mark your calendar. Tomorrow is our Friday training at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here. I hope you are enjoying our differential focus as much as I am enjoying bringing it to you. So have a wonderful evening. Oh, thank you, ladies. You are so sweet. Thank you for being on here, and I will see you tomorrow.